All right. Thank you for joining me for this very special bonus episode of Parenting Wins Now. This episode is unique in that we're going to be really niching down on homeschooling and the philosophies that Anika and I like the most. Anika. So, for those of you who are watching this, feel free to message us. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to help walk you through it. There's a Facebook group. So, yeah, without further ado, Anika, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Katie. You asked if, I had any nuggets, some motherhood, homeschooling nuggets, and I do, and I want to start with two passages of scripture, if that's okay. The first would be Psalm 139, 13 through 16.
In the notes.
For you have formed me, you have formed my inward parts. You wove me in my mother's womb. I will give thanks to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the depths of the earth. Your eyes have seen my unformed substance, and your book were all written, in your book, all written, the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there was not one of me. And then in Matthew 19, verses 13 and 15, then some children were brought to him so that he might lay hands on them and pray. And then the disciples rebuked them. But Jesus said, let the children alone and do not hinder them from coming to me, for the kingdom of belongs to such as these. After laying hands on them, he departed from there. I picked these two because my nugget that the Lord gave me was to explain to me in my heart that I didn't make these children that I'm raising. They were made in me. They were fearfully and wonderfully made by a creator that loves them infinitely more than even I do. And my job is to get them from point A whenever they enter the world and my family and my home. I have 3 natural born children and 1 adopted. So when they came in, from that point on, I'm responsible for training them up in the ways of the Lord and the way he created them. They're each unique, fearfully and wonderfully made, and to get them to that place in adulthood where they're flying. Now, I always want to have a nest that my little birdies can fly back to and wrestle with things of the Lord or the world, or, share their struggles. I want that, but I have to build it. I hear parents lament all the time. Their adult kids are making mistakes and they're not coming to them, or they just won't listen to me. And I've learned if I just trust the Lord, what his word says, that they will. And I have 2 adult children, and they call me all the time, anytime, day or night, and say, Mom, can you talk? Because I'm going to listen. So that's kind of a huge point, that we would show our children in the abundance, more abundantly, the grace to them as we parent, as we need from God every day. I make mistakes all the time. I can be edgy or anxious, and then that can come across as like being short-fused. But if I try to show them that grace every day, that I need, remember that they need it as well. And that the key point, to apologize often as needed, and not for silly things like, or not like, sorry that happened, but really just genuinely like, hey, I was short with you. I apologize. That genuineness they need it. Children, another little nugget, children do well if they can. And that is a quote from a Dr. Ross Green, who has great books on challenging children. But it was a huge lesson for me to learn in home educating, because sometimes they can't do it. Sometimes, and if we stick with, well, they're sinning, they're not doing it. If we stick with that rigidness and we aren't full of that grace that God pours in us, we can have really unrealistic expectations. So giving them developmentally appropriate, not age appropriate, developmentally appropriate skill sets. What are we working on? You don't give a 2-year-old a chore to tie his shoes. And yet in the homeschool community, we hear, we score higher, and there's all these great worldly expectations of our home educated students that, and even in the world, my public school friends, same thing, Christian school friends, we have all these standards, and, oh, Johnny is not making that. And maybe they're just not able to. So that phrase, children do well if they can, I akin it to, we have land, and on it, we try to manage it. My family hunts, and I know that can be controversial, but we realized we weren't seeing as many deer or whatever, because it was a rundown property. So over the years, we've cultivated that land. We've carved out trails, and we mow them, and dig out ruts. And the deer are sinfully lazy, just like us, I guess. So they love those paths. So now when I go for a walk, I can see them any time of the year. I can see the turkey and all the little critters, because we've trained the path. Does that make sense? We're cultivating, we're snipping the branches. If a tree falls over, we're chopping that down and getting it out of the way, taking care of those obstacles. And so it is like raising children. Life's going to have obstacles, and the weeds will try to take over. And rocks, believe it or not, just sort of migrate to the surface and trip you up. And so I think the big nugget for me has been, like, if they can't do well, if a subject is a struggle, then I need to find out, is it a heart issue? Is their heart far from me? Did something happen? Are they having a sibling conflict, or are they feeling insecure because they're struggling with a skill set? If I give them an assignment to write a paper, which I did years ago to my daughter, and she just had a meltdown, and I couldn't figure out, is this a sin thing? Like, is she just defying me? Because she was defiant in her spirit. But I sought the Lord in prayer, and I remembered this, like, children do well if they can. It's optimal. It's easier to do well, because then there's no conflict. Nobody loves conflict, right? It means maybe privilege is lost. It could mean a lot of uncomfortable things for a kiddo. And I just prayed, and I asked her, like, what part of this is hard? And it was writing. She had dysgraphia. And so through that process, she's like, can I just tell you the story? Can I, we got a dragon speak easy thing. I think that's what it's called. And so she could tell it in a microphone to the computer, and it would type it up, and then she could erase, the mistakes. Cause just like when I've got my Google thing, I'm texting you over the voice, and it, it turns out I've, jumped into a barbecue pit or something crazy. But it was that, what is making it so hard for you to do this? And how can I help you? Because that's my job, right? If I'm a coach, if I'm a trainer, I need to come alongside and say, where are you at? And how can I get you on the path you're going to be on? And it looks different for each kiddo. But if I just make the assumption, and I just have my standards and my rules, they're never going to live up to it. And they're never going to be able to say, hey, I need help with this. Because as adults, they need to identify, and I struggle with that. I don't know about you, struggling, like, why do I feel anxious? What is troubling me? Why am I edgy as I'm, chopping up the carrots in the kitchen? Like, what's going on? And learning to identify that, so that I can take it to the Lord in prayer. That's something I want to give my kids, that skill set. So I think giving them and guiding them and training them is about equipping them with that developmentally appropriate skill set, and not having unrealistic expectations in our own heart about, well, the neighbor kid's a grade behind and doing more. It doesn't matter, because, the tortoise and the hare, you got to go at the pace that's right for you. And some of us have a hare for a child, and they're just running circles and they're not getting anywhere.
Mhm.
So there's that. So
Mhm.
I just think it's key to remember that we're not making them. They are made, and we're called to love them and nurture them, to guide them and train them up in a way that's very different, that's very unique. And he trusts us to get them from that point A to point B with inflicting the least amounts of damage. We're damaged people, most of us. Haven't met any that aren't. We're wounded souls, and hurt people. So kind of keeping in mind that they're his, and he made them, and he's trusting us. If I remember that, then I remember to be careful with that crystal vase. It's not mine. I didn't make it. It's delicate. It's fragile. I don't want to break it, but I need to use it every day to keep that shine on, or it'll just get dusty. So I need to participate and enjoy it because it's his. And I think just like our children, we need to enjoy them and read books. And I think, when you and I talk homeschooling, it is snuggling up at the couch with them, and it's reading to them, and it's not lecturing them, because sometimes, Nellie is so naughty in the little Laura Ingalls Wilder book. She's so naughty that you could do a whole sermonette on her, but you have to just trust the work he's doing. And then someday when you're making supper or washing the dishes, somebody's going to say, that Nellie, 3 days after you've read it, or 3 weeks, that Nellie, she just, like, the Lord puts that character on their heart and be like, I don't want to be like that. Or so-and-so treats me like that when we go to the park. And how do I handle that, Mom? And so I'm rambling. I'm sorry, but
no, it's so good. I mean, yeah, just keep going.
but if I have all these expectations of them, like, you will do this. I remember a big popular phrase a decade ago was, do what I say, do it right away, do it with a God-pleasing attitude.
Oh, wow.
And I know a lot of families have heard that and they've used that, but it also tells me that I'm telling them to not think when authority tells them something. I'm telling them to do it on my timeline. I'm not giving any consideration for what else could be going on right then. And I'm telling them to fake it. Fake it. Put on a shiny, happy face, even if your best friend just was so hurtful on the phone, and I don't care, because you're going to do what I say. You're going to do it right away. I don't have time to listen to you or your excuses, right? And you need to fake it and give me a God-pleasing attitude.
As if pleasing God were the goal.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So if you're honest about the gospel, like, right. So I need to be careful what I say, because that could be really misunderstood. So here's what I think about that. Yes, absolutely. We are creators. We fall into a certain order. We are not God.
Right.
We are his creation. So we fall into a certain order. But if we're coming, the gospel says that we're not coming to him as people who could ever please him. The words
exactly.
Our works are filthy rags.
Exactly.
And when I heard you say, do it now, do it with a pleasing attitude, like, and that's faking it. Like,
it is.
God never asks us to fake where we're at. Now, does that mean that we never mature into people who can show up with a smile under difficult circumstances? No, that is the picture of maturity. Is that I've dealt with my heart, and whatever disappointment I have, I've dealt with that before God. Therefore, I can go out and serve with a joyful attitude, even when life is falling apart. But it doesn't mean pretending that life isn't falling apart, or that we just, quote this thing and now we're good. Because we all know that doesn't work. And if anything, it alienates us from our children.
And it alienates them from the Lord, because he ordained for us to parent them, to nurture them, to to be a joyful part of this transition from infancy to adulthood, or for however long they're in our lives.
Mhm.
That is such a gift. And that relationship that we build with them will be something that they can say, well, I can go to God with this.
Mhm.
Mom trusted God, and I trust mom and dad. They are genuine. They never asked me to lie or fake it. They were patient with me, long suffering with me. That means we actually have to be that. We have to be those things that Christ calls us to be. He says, "Be holy, for I am holy." I I have to just pursue my relationship with the Lord
Mhm.
so that I can, out of that, there can be an outpouring of that grace and love and patience that He shows me to them.
Mhm.
Like, I get to be the conduit. Like, we're literally the vessel,
Right.
cracked and broken, but we're that vessel, and He's pouring into us and we're pouring into them.
Mhm.
And we can't do that if we have those expectations, if we don't understand that children do well if they can. I do well if I can. Don't you? I mean, if you can,
Yeah.
you're going to shine. And if
Right.
you're struggling with something, how much better to say, I can't do this. This is embarrassing, or this is hard. And we struggle to do that. Why would I expect my 3-year-old
Mhm.
to to miraculously be like, "Oh, well, I am developmentally not prepared to do what my older siblings are doing, so I will just be patient." No, they're going to flip out and be like, "I
Mhm.
don't understand why I can't run that fast, and I don't understand why I can't tie my shoe." And then they're on the ground in the middle of the grocery store
Mhm.
sobbing
Mhm.
because they tried to run, they tripped and fell over their shoelace, and they can't fix it, and it's overwhelming.
Mhm.
And it's those moments that, as a mom, we kind of want to pull our hair out, just like, oh, but it's also in those moments we have to just say, hey, if you could, I know you would, and you're making progress, and
Mhm.
you're gonna get there.
Yeah.
How can I help you?
Mhm.
Do you want me to help you tie your shoe? Should we practice running in the yard every day? You're so fast, and just walking through those ways. Does that make sense?
I love that. I just love that. I know. I know. I sit and I enjoy my kids now in a way that I never could before. And I have to just give myself grace for that too, because I was showing up with just as much heart then as I am now.
Right.
But I have a decade of growing in receiving the grace from God.
Amen.
And that has made all the difference. And so, like, even though we're in COVID, like, I'm like, ooh, this is how do they need me to show up for them? Their personalities are so different from mine. They don't need me to, you know, cheer them on to go do something creative in the backyard. That's not where they're at. But finding out how I can come alongside them and encourage them right where they're at. I love that, and give them grace, just like you were saying at the beginning, just like I've received it.
Yeah. And it's hard to do that, and to remember we can be anxious for nothing. I mean, the fact that God tells us not to fear or be anxious 365 times. It's at least one a day for
Mhm.
this weary soul. Like, hey, He has them. He
Mhm.
loves them.
Mhm.
I need to just love them and train them. What skills do they need?
Mhm.
What patience will they need? COVID's a great time to talk about, hey, you guys are being super patient with waiting on all of this. You guys are being so
Mhm.
kind to one another. Like, and just finding the moments, even if they're fighting 98% of the time, that 2%, you got to be like, hey, you guys,
Mhm.
really appreciate how much you've grown. This would have been really hard, had you not shown that grace to your brother.
You're giving me an idea right now. So even though my sons are 16 and going to be 18 in 2 days, um,
Wow.
I,
Happy birthday. I
I
know.
know,
Wow.
I'm like grieving that because I'm like I had such pictures of what that would look like, and we're weird too because he graduated like 3 years ago. He's one of those run ahead people, and his brother has also graduated this year, 3 years early.
Okay.
And we don't have the sign in the yard that says our person graduated, and so like there's this weird mix of our sons doing these really amazing things,
Yeah.
um with their skills, talents, and abilities. And what you're talking about just now reminds me, like, as a mom, I get to show up and be the one that says, I see you. I
Yep.
see what you're doing that works. And I
Yep.
just want you to know I'm so proud of the right choices you're making.
Yeah.
And you're not doing it for the approval of man. You're not doing it for the approval of me. You're doing it because you figured out that it's okay to try and learn and go
Right.
do. And I'm just, yeah, like you're reminding me, like, I need to make a special moment. Like, it's, so we're recording this on a Thursday. I need to make a special moment every week where I just edify my kids. And I don't mean just
Yeah.
the one-offs, because I do that all the time. That's kind of my personality. But really just saying, if you are a complainer, this would just be so much harder.
Right.
And thank you for not doing that.
Right. You're really,
And maybe
no,
that
you're hitting it.
Yeah.
You're hitting it on the head.
Where they're like, well, actually, I'm complaining in my heart. And even if it goes to that, like, how great is that? Because now we get to talk about what's real. And
What's going on? Well, and that was why I chose that second passage, because Jesus said, let them come to me. They were going to him on their own, on something, maybe the power of the Holy Spirit drawing them to Jesus. And so often we sort of attack the children with how they have to go to him. And I think
yeah.
we get in the way.
Mhm.
And it's one of the things I love about the Carol Joy Side method is we present, it's just part of who we are. We're showering our home with Jesus, like bathing it in the Bible and the gospel story, but we're not being Pharisees.
Mhm.
Hey, here's the rules. You better do this. You better do what I say, do it right away, right? All that. We're not doing that. We're letting them come to him because we're living a vibrant, authentic, real relationship right before their eyes. If we're humble enough to say, mommy was growly while she was making dinner and I'm sorry. And something upset my heart and wasn't you. And I need you. When we own it, they see that and then they trust in it, and we aren't in the way. We don't become the stumbling block to their faith. And I love that Jesus rebuked the disciples. They were disciples. They were great. He chose them, but they could easily get in the way.
Mhm.
Does that make?
Oh, yeah. That's so good. And I think that's a great foundation for talking more about methodology. I'm not sure if you wanted to talk more
We
about.
can.
So I'm taking notes. So we're 22 minutes. So maybe I'll edit it
We're
right here and like make it 2 parts or something.
okay.
I don't know. That's just some feedback that I've gotten from people's, like, shorter is better.
Okay.
So maybe I'll end up doing that later. But yeah, if you have just a few more, maybe, like, let's just go like 10 minutes on. I know there's probably not going to be enough, but just 10 more minutes. Just
Sure.
to give a picture of what works for you as a homeschooling mom.
Okay. Well, how do you?
Yeah. So
What do you mean? Okay, we're starting.
what I mean by
Okay.
that. So there's as many ways to homeschool as there are, plants on the planet. What's the homeschool method that you have used, and what about it worked for you, and what's kind of the framework of it?
Well, I use the Carol Joy Side method, which is a literary based program, and it's sort of set on history as our timeline. So imagine that being the coat rack that you get from IKEA. You've got this frame and everything you hang on there, with the exception of math. I think those are the wheels that make everything move or something at the bottom. Everything that gets hung on my rack is on history. So that makes figuring out what books we're going to read kind of easy. Was it written in that era, or is it written about that era? So in the historical books we read are genuinely, they're not a boring, dry textbook. They're engaging. People at my house cannot wait. Even the grown adults who've read it, if they're home when we're reading a child's history of the world, or, our island story, it's amazing how fast they come in the living room and, oh my gosh, I remember this part. And, oh, you know what's going to happen next. And they're a grown adult. They're just as excited as ever. So that's our method. And Carol often refers to it as a relaxed homeschooling method. And I think what it does is it removes certain expectations and it gives the children a freedom to excel because we're not constraining. It really honors their development as a person, because if you're 5 or very little, 5, 6 years old, and you're reading a book, Carol's really clear to make sure they have flashlights for under the covers. And there's that freedom. And if they're not, no sweat. You're busy baking chocolate cake and getting the house ready for the daddy who's going to come home. And you're busy and you're learning. You're learning how to measure and you're learning how to tidy. And these are all life skills that we need. So it honors a child's development, where I felt in my research that a lot of the programs didn't. And they forced sort of an age conformity, and each child was at a whole different program. Carol's program has the whole family is kind of, unless there's a huge age span, we're all doing history together. And as a mom of 4 kids, that was handy. My older kids were obviously reading history in greater depth and reading big biographies about historical characters and in that era, where the little kids we're reading the picture books, but we're all in that era. And then the family can have these delightful dinner conversations telling daddy or grandparents everything they learned that week and all the exciting things. And did you know about the Mississippi River? And did you know have you heard of Mark Twain? I mean, the enthusiasm, because I don't have to test that. I can hear them tell it to me again. And that's been huge, because a lot of conversations have been had when they enter the age of reading the chapter books, some of them to themselves. There's usually a little history book that I read aloud, but then there's the chapter books they're assigned. And washing dishes and folding laundry, I would say, so tell me about what you read in the chapter today. And they will tell you all about it. And the look on their face when they're about 4th or 5th grade, around that age, is, oh, I didn't really pay attention enough to tell mom. And then there's but I need to know what happened. So they would disappear and reread that chapter because they have to tell me. And then again, at the end of the week, kind of that, let's tell dad all about it. They would be very proud of what they had learned and excited to tell everyone. I liked that we were not teaching to a test, that we were teaching for mastery, and we could go at a relaxed pace, nurturing them. Another benefit of a relaxed homeschooling is academically they soared, they flew, they went further than I would have ever planned for them. I feel like some of the homeschooling parents, they put that ceiling on them. And homeschooling this way, there is no ceiling. You're going to go as far as the good Lord has you go if you're trusting it. But it also gave flexibility. When my parents were both dying, we were able to be with them, and my children would read aloud the stories from their school books, and how joy-filled my parents would be saying, okay, I get you're going to read to me a story now, and can I tell you a story? Those relationships, they thank me to this day. Thanks for quitting karate for that season so I could be with Opa before he went to be with the Lord. Thank you for that. And just that they had opportunity. When I took ill with the brain tumor, that was challenging to homeschool through that. But what a joy to have Diana Waring's history CDs playing in the car as we went to doctor's appointments, and they had little Zukas. Do you know what those are?
Mm-mm.
They're like backpacks on wheels.
Oh,
so they would put their books and things and their art pads in their Zukas. And even if the waiting room was packed, they had a place to sit. They would just sit on their wheeled backpack and read. We did school everywhere, every hospital room, doctor's offices. There they were reading. And sometimes people would engage them and they would just tell them everything. Well, you would never believe what Thomas Jefferson did. And guess what he said? And people, they just, oh my goodness, because they're full of such a joy to learn. Kind of like when that passage says, let them come to me. When they hear and learn his story, because that's what history is, and they learn about all these other people, real people, just like I'm real and they're real and their dad is real. It's exciting, and it makes literature exciting. It makes everything come together, and it comes alive, and it's beautiful because you get to just see the Holy Spirit move in them. And yeah, I'm blown away at who they've become and the relationship we have. I'm homeschooling one more, and he's in high school, and what a joy. I love the teen years more than anything. I feel like I did all the hard work through junior high, and then they get to that like 8th grade, 9th grade, and it's like, oh, now it's fun. Now we're having those intellectual discussions and picking apart literature and film study. We do a movies as lit group, and what a joy. The kids have to stop. I know kids that, because of our culture, I thought it was an important thing to do and offer up to fellow homeschoolers. What a joy for these kids who struggle in language arts, because it's not, the program maybe isn't appropriate for their developmental place, to be in a group of kids who are relaxed homeschooling and they're watching a movie like Roman Holiday. And just so many of the girls expect for the main character to leave the crown for this guy. And you're like, really? Audrey Hepburn's a queen. Like, she's not leaving anything. She's like, she's going to hold her crown. And so that was, the controversy in the group. But after so long, they know the main characters. They know the plot. They know the denouement. They walk through all that. And some of them, they would come to me later and say, this has made literature class so much easier. Oh, I felt like I couldn't understand my lit teacher. Shakespeare's starting to make sense, Mrs. Cornforth. It's really, what a joy to take that relaxed attitude towards that and just trust. I'm not worried about my son becoming a freshman or a sophomore or a junior or a second grader. I'm worried about that. I'm not worried at all. I trust in that horizon view. When you climb the mountaintop and you see all the dips and the valleys, and then there's some you can't see, that horizon view is my big picture. I'm raising them to be adults, centered, healthy, godly adults, I hope. People that are kind and good and gracious and helpful. I am not raising my 3rd grader to be a 4th grader. That's too short-sighted. So it also it affords that grace that you and I often talk about in my perspective. Because if I'm just worried about next year, I'm never getting that big picture view.
Right.
And I can get lost in those woods, and I can get overwhelmed. And we all know what being an overwhelmed homeschool mom is like, and it's not a productive mom. Right. She's spinning her wheels, and it's a place I try to avoid. I mean, I still get there, but it's a place I don't want to get stuck there. Like in Pilgrim's Progress, there's spots where he lingers and he gets sort of stuck in his head. No, you gotta have that horizon view. Where am I going? What are my goals? And what are theirs? And how do I help them get there? That's it. How do I help them? It's not about them being mini-me's or them being the next Einstein. They're going to be who they're going to be, but will they want me in their life when they're older? Will I have equipped them to succeed if I'm not even here? And I think having, watched my parents pass and having gone through a brain tumor. Those are real things that I thank the Lord for putting in the forefront of my mind, because I might not get to teach them that when they're 29.
Mm-hmm.
If I messed it, but will they know to go to the Lord? Will they know what to do? So my time is generous, and I have to trust that, but it's also finite.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I hit things, my mom's not here for me to run to.
Right.
She's not. So she had to do that part. And I think that's why I enjoy Carol's method, the relaxed homeschooling method, because the characters are real. I don't have to sermonize them. You just pick up any piece of literature. I love Emma. Did you ever see the movie Clueless? It's exactly the same as Emma. Okay,
like a long time. I'll have to pull up.
Well, and so I always have teenagers watch Clueless first, even though there's some offensive stuff in there. But I have them watch it first, and then we will read Emma and watch Emma. And they're always like, "She's such an airhead. What is her?" I'm like, exactly. Mm-hmm. She's lovable. She's meddling. She's and they have to reflect. Ma, I have a friend kind of like Emma, and how can you love her? Because you're not going to change her, but how can you love her and help her in her walk? But it's sometimes important to really just see people for where they are, and books take you there. They introduce you to characters and villains and all these beautiful things that like waking up in your heart. It's so much safer to have you or daddy read the scary characters in like Dickens novels or whatever, because the kids will say, I saw a man acting like this at Walmart and it made me think of that character. But then they knew to stick by like the older sibling, because they learning to trust that gut instinct that the Lord is still developing in them. And those characters, they come alive. And in the home, when you're reading aloud and you're snuggled on the couch and everyone's safe, being introduced to funny and witty and spacey and, oh, there's a squirrel, like all of these people, they'll start to see that life is full of them and they're not all going to be just like them. So how can I love my neighbor as myself if I expect them to be like me because I'm apparently so awesome? Like does that make sense? They'll be putting.
So you make me want to go buy right now. We only have one of his on our shelves. We're like fans of the library, but you're reminding me that I've really wanted to get a couple of his books. So
we're big advocates for the read aloud. There's certain books it's a read aloud. If we're traveling, books on, we used to be books on tape and now it's streaming. Audible. So Audible, or our library has a Hoopla, or I don't know.
Is the library open right now though?
No, but their online is.
Oh, okay.
They have they might even have a drive by and pick up, but I have a really good library, but I don't have a lot on CD, and my car doesn't even have a CD player anymore. So we have to do the streaming, but there's so many wonderful books. And so I love Carol would say, always have one that daddy's reading, and don't cheat and read ahead. If he has to go on a business trip, you have to wait. And what a joy it is for the family when he returns and he picks up that book again. And everybody's been talking my husband would travel a lot. Everybody would be talking the whole week. Well, what do you think is going to happen next? I mean, I don't understand what he's going to do next. And what's his, Mary Emma and Company, or Ralph, any of the Ralph Moody books. Oh, the anxiety, the children will be talking about it nonstop. And that builds relationships. My children are best friends. We don't have bickering in our house usually. I mean, occasional, but it's usually like when you're playing a board game and you're disagreeing about the move and, hey, you took that part. Fun. It's fun. Nobody's angry because they they legitimately did life together, not next to each other, not parallel.
Mhm.
They really were interactively a part of it. They were daydreaming together and laying at the corner of their bedrooms and whispering late at night. They're on each of them in their own rooms on the floor, just talking. And I would hear them talking about what was going to happen with Frog and Toad. And could you believe how outrageous he was in Wind of the Willows? I mean, like, whoa, that guy is so crazy naughty.
Love that story, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a beautiful thing to have that relaxed homeschool, and because everything matters, from making the meals to planning to
Mhm.
hospitality, and there's no stress. Like if there's stress, you're adding it. It's
Right.
or there's a circumstance that you're going to get past because
Mhm.
it's circumstantial. My parents being ill was stressful, but how much more it would have been if I was trying to follow someone else's schedule.
Mhm.
We had grace. We could just carry it in through the summer. They
Mhm.
don't want me to stop reading. The only thing they're usually hopeful for is I'll stop math. Just
Mhm.
stop. Can we not do math in the summer?
Mhm.
But the book reading,
Mhm.
why stop? The geography, why? They
Mhm.
want to look at the map every time somebody mentions a
Right.
city. Where is that? What country is that? How do I get there? Can I drive? Is it
Mhm.
the same for you?
Oh yeah, yeah. When they were younger, I did a timeline on the wall, and then that
Yeah.
became like a map on the wall that we connected to the timeline, and then we knew people from all over the world, not unlike yourself. So we were, linking, we
Yeah.
had a string, then we would, link to different countries and then different time periods, and then it was a lot of fun. But now we cannot watch anything without Googling everything about those people that they're working on, and who wrote it, and why did they write, and what was happening in their life when they wrote that script
Right.
about that movie that we liked so much. And oh my gosh, so many of our favorite authors, they were writing for their own children, and they had other lives, but the one thing that was really successful was what they did for their kids. I mean, so that's like just an ongoing part of the culture of our home,
Yes.
all of that. And how do you make family life work, and when trials and hardships come, how do you get through it, and how do you show up for it? And so those are all things that were, and how did other people do it,
Yeah.
um and so constantly looking up the things that we're exposed to has just been a beautiful foray into just this whole other world of mentors that we would have never had access to.
Yeah.
So,
Which mentors have been most profound to you as a mother?
oh, so I have my go-tos. There's definitely Carol. I mean, it's really funny because we joke all the time, is this Carol approved or something like
Yeah.
a mentor that I love that doesn't write directly to mothers is Henry Cloud.
Okay.
His work has been so foundational for me. I love in the Laura Ingalls Wilder books, the mom in that series. I
Right?
remember reading through that series, and I couldn't. It was the first time I was reading it. Our sons were 10 and 8 at the time, and I thought I couldn't stop. I couldn't put it down. I stayed up until 3 a.m. like a couple nights in a row to get through all the books.
Wow.
I know. I was binging. But what in reading it that quickly, what I noticed was that Laura's mom, who lived in a dugout, was relying on, a hole in the ground to go to the bathroom. I mean, just
Right?
horrible circumstances by our standards. And it's not until book 4 that she complains. And her complaint is when they literally have to dig out dirt on the side of a river while they're building their house. And so they're settling, they're on the prairie, and um they have to literally live in a dirt dugout. And the mom says, "Oh, Charles, do we really have to live in the dirt?" And it's just like that one line in 4
Yep.
books. And so just watching the attitudes of the people, the characters in the books,
Yeah.
how that helps me be more introspective about my own heart and my own behavior without it being preachy. Like Dr. Henry Cloud is definitely, self-help or, developmental for
Sure.
but watching those characters in the books has been beautiful too. We love Peter Pan. We didn't read it when our kids were little, and like the opening couple of chapters, we just died because we were like, oh my gosh, that's our dad. And we thought he was so weird, and we weren't sure if it was normal, and we weren't, and so now there's like this whole acceptance that
Yeah.
some dads are like this, and we still love them. And not only do we still love them, but like we can laugh about it now, because now
Right.
we're not like, daddy's freaking out. Now we're like, well, freaking out's kind of part of life. And we're not the only ones freaking out. And
Right.
so even though it's, we've always looked for those other families that
Yeah.
were growing together and figuring out how to do life well together. And sometimes it's just a long road to find that, and it's
Yeah.
hard to coordinate schedules sometimes. So having great books to read and having those examples in literature whenever we're ready for them
Right.
really works well.
I agree. And that I love when you talked about when you binged. There have been times, and there's one book, and it was, I don't know if you've heard of it, Listening for Lions.
Oh,
It's by Gloria Whalen,
mhm.
and she's the daughter of missionaries. And anyway, it's quite a little adventure. But that day, I had all these plans in my mind, and I thought I'll just read one chapter, because if it's I don't know how many chapters is in it, but it's not that long. And if in a few, like in 2 weeks, we'll be done with this book. I couldn't put it down. I read the whole thing aloud. The children would run and get me water because my voice was, I'm like, I can't stop. We were sitting there just I don't even remember eating. I think they were just snacking on cheese and crackers. They were so enthralled. But those relationships, like you said, it's fellowship is great, and having friends, especially if they're similar spirits, is super beneficial. But having that family relationship is huge, because I know wherever life takes my kids, no matter what end of the globes they will be on, they will travel the ends of the earth to have each other's backs, no matter what, because they are tight and they have this common thread. My oldest son is he's 23, and my 15-year-old, obviously there's a big span. And the 15-year-old really bonded with my 21-year-old while the other guy was at college. So now he's back for this, this window of time. You graduate, you're broke, you need a car, you need a job, and then you need to get out. And so he's on the cusp of moving out. But I'm thankful that my daughter was gone for this year, because those brothers, even though they're, significant 8 years apart, they're so tight now. And they've had a chance to bond, and the older one will be like, oh yeah, Robinson Crusoe is like so hard until you get to like this part, and then it's like amazing. But like we all cried it's almost like the first 4 chapters. They're just like, Mom, no, every page is torture. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, and as soon as he got to that part in the book, he ran to his brother's room and he was like, oh, you're right. And they're bonding over literature.
Love it.
Over those stories that
make me want to go pull out those books and be like, okay, we're starting this back up again.
We're going to just keep reading together.
Keep reading.
And even now, as we read, as adults, we read Dr. Cloud. There's an author, Gavin DeBecker, that has written some really great things. His book, Gift of Fear, is a huge blessing, because though he's not a believer, I hear him. I feel like the fear he's talking about is a good fear, like that we should trust the instincts the Holy Spirit is given us. So I was reading that book, and now somebody else is reading that book, and my daughter has read that book, and it's just getting passed around the house. So there's discussions, and people are like, but I haven't read that part yet. We're like, read faster. You want to be a part of the chat at the dining room table. And that's huge, because now my teenage son is wanting to read books that are college level and beyond, but he's like, oh, this sounds like a great book. I want to know this. And I think that's what happens when you're not doing grades. You're just doing life together,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's beautiful.
That's awesome. I love that. I've enjoyed our conversation so much. You've given me a bunch of ideas about where to go from here. But for right now, I think, wow, that was so beautiful and so enriching. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time.
All right. God bless you. Bye.
Bless you. Bye.